Hello, welcome to the show. It is a crisp Saturday morning where I am filming from right now. Well, not really filming, I'm not on camera. And trust me, that's better for everybody right now. Slept in, beard is getting patchier, weirder, more hobo-like. So, um, yeah, today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm reviewing some Pine Creek stuff. He had this, Pine Creek has, if anybody does watch his content, he does long live streams, usually around 3 hours, and I think he does at least one a week. And then usually as the result of some of that conversation, he'll make kind of these snarky kind of, well, implicitly snarky kind of clips out of those or out of conversations he has being a guest on other people's shows. And that's where this video I'm going to be reviewing is coming from. He was over on, let me see here. This was on P.F. Young's channel, I think, with the panel in there, Enlightened Centrist. I'm hoping that that's meant to be tongue-in-cheek because that's kind of a contradiction in terms. Anyway, so he was having a conversation with Jessiah over there, and I think that Jessiah's from his YouTube channel is called Pondering Politics. I think Jessiah is maybe kind of a semi-regular guest over on there, and the two of these guys cross paths. So yeah, that's really the only context here, and I think this is from a couple 3 weeks ago, and Doug decided to make this clip with this kind of edgy, tongue out, that conservative shreds, quote unquote, woke progressive on razor wire at Pondering Politics, at PF Young, #immigration. So I kind of have a question. I don't know how to make my titles that long. If I try to fill in a title with that many ats and hashtags, it doesn't work. I try to keep my tags limited to the description because from what I understand, it works just as well, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But anyway, Pine Creek has been doing that because I guess he said somebody had given him some advice on how to do that to get the views, get his stuff out there. Michael Dayton writes, will Pine Creek take the Rush Limbaugh challenge and take up smoking while denying the medical science that clearly shows a linkage between tobacco usage and cancer? Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because Pine Creek early on had mentioned he was a smoker, or maybe still is kind of. But yeah, for a while he was on the Nicorette gum. I think he's kicked it. So yeah, was a smoker, no longer. I think he's kicked that habit. So no, I don't think although I don't know, he's a poker fan. I don't know if he's maybe like the occasional cigar guy, come poker night kind of thing. Could be. So I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat. Special shout out to Simus. Good to see you, Simus. And thanks for sending me that link to your show. I got it late last night. I didn't get the notification through Discord, but I was able to join in at the tail end. They were kind of wrapping up. I think you were already gone, but thanks for that. And all right, I don't think there's too much I need to say other than, this is a short one, so I don't think this is going to be a long video. And we're just going to get into this a little bit and see what's going on here. So again, this is an excerpt from it. I don't have the main link. I've got the link to this short here. I'm pretty sure that Doug has the link to the whole thing. Yeah, illegal immigration FT at Pondering Politics. I think that's the main one. So if you're interested in watching that over at again, I'm not sure if this was at Pondering. It might have been at Pondering Politics channel, but yeah, go ahead and take a look at it and see. So let's get this started. See what Pine Creek is going to do for, with, or to Jessiah.
Let me ask you some basic questions.
Sure.
Let me ask you some basic questions. If this is going to be some kind of hypothetical or an if this or that kind of thing, it's not really a basic question. It's usually going to be some kind of hypothetical scenario. And yeah, what would you do
if razor wire wasn't a deterrent?
Yeah.
What's the downside of it? It's hurting people and maybe just cost?
Sure. I'm sure that there's that factor too. I don't know what the pricing is, but yeah.
Humanitarian concerns. And you've already admitted that when it comes to people being hurt, you put more responsibility on the person getting hurt for being so stupid to try to cross razor wire.
Yes. Yeah. I think that they are more responsible.
Okay, so then really now it's down to cost. The downside.
No, it's not. No, it's not, because I would argue that even if, because I know you like to throw like meaningless abstract numbers. How much of a percentage would you say a person, even if, let's say, a person is 80% responsible, or even 90% responsible, when they cross razor wire? I think that 10% of the federal government of the United States, I think that's enough for the U.S. to act humanely. And that's why.
Okay, so there's multiple concerns with where these guys are going with this, and so criticism all around, because the one thing that they've left out is that, and it's easy to do with this conversation. So the use of razor wire as a deterrent is already kind of sketchy, and the reason that it became an issue was for two reasons. One, federal employees would have to remove it, because the razor wire that's being put down is not being coordinated with federal response and border patrol. The Texas government is using, with the National Guard, are going in and asking private landowners if they can install it, and in many cases the landowners say yes, and so the state puts that in there, and depending on where it crosses, where federal border agents are working, it can get in their way. So they were cutting it, and Texas sued the feds because they were removing the concertina wire that they had put down. So that was sort of the beginning of the, my understanding, that was sort of the initial litigious push by Texas was, hey, you can't do this. The Justice Department, however, had sued Texas or issued an order for them to stop. I'm not sure, technically what they did, about the usage of barrels that were wrapped in concertina wire. There are these large round orange barrels, and they line them up on a rope and float them in the middle of the river. And they're very visible. So as far as like them trying to argue, Texas went, well, it's a deterrent. They've got razor wire on them and they're bright orange, and there you go. The problem with that was that they, in high water, from my understanding, some of them were not visible. And so they went from being a deterrent to being kind of a booby trap. And that's where the inhumane treatment starts to come in. It's one thing for you to put out a sign or a big gate or something like that. It's one thing for you to, build a gate, leave a little opening, and then there's a trap that springs in the middle of it. That's a little bit, and I'm not saying that they intentionally did that, but these buoys did do that. It did kill a pregnant mother, from what I understand. It cut her up so badly that she died from it. And then, so the Justice Department and other federal agencies were like, no, you can't do this. This is inhumane. This is just weird. Not only that, but it's oftentimes the buoys along with the razor wire were frequently in the way of the federal employees whose job it is to protect the border. Texas and Governor Abbott will frequently come out, hey, we have a constitutional duty to protect the border. It's like, yeah, do you though, as the state? I don't know. Maybe that's in the state's constitution with something to do with that. But generally, the protection of the international borders is the responsibility of the federal government. The cost of that is not something that is supposed to lay on an individual state. And the fact that guys like Governor Abbott and other politicians will say, well, like, these states are going broke trying to do this kind of stuff. A lot of the efforts that they're taking on their own. They're doing it in excess of what the federal government is doing. And they're claiming like, well, we're doing the job the federal government won't, or really what it means is that they're doing it in a way they want to see it done, but the feds either have not been funded to do it that way or haven't been legally authorized to do it that way. So this has become a huge state versus fed mess. But the real issue here, though, is when Doug brings this thing up with Jessiah, the whole thing is like, okay, well, it's a deterrent, so what's the big deal? The issue that popped up with the buoys was not that they were a deterrent, but that they were a trap, and a lethal one, a potentially lethal trap. And it wasn't just that they could affect migrants that were doing an illegal activity. They could potentially injure wildlife there. They could injure U.S. citizens there that were stupid enough to go out there and mess with those things. So, yeah. And then there's something to be said about where, is it lawful for them to just do that? Also, international laws about using those kinds of deterrents might come into play too. So, yeah, so keep that in mind. It's one thing to just say, oh, well, as a deterrent, what's the big deal? Pine Creek, Doug is kind of consistent with this kind of thing. It's like, okay, yeah, the deterrent thing was not the issue that really got people upset. It was the pregnant woman slicing herself up so bad that she bled to death on a barrel that was that wasn't visible. Like they were underwater and cutting people up. Also, it should be mentioned that the removal of the razor wire above the water, not the buoys, from what I understand, just the removal of the concertina wire has not lethally, but kind of seriously injured at least a couple federal employees. Just moving the stuff around. That stuff is not safe to work with. So there's that issue too. Like, look, this stuff is it's freaking hazardous. It's a wire loaded with razor blades. So yeah, maybe not a great idea.
So like you, for example, are willing to
Again, you're talking way too much.
I understand that you're willing to let people die in the Rio Grande. I think that that's a terrible policy.
I'm going to check your consistency. Again,
Sure.
if you in your own home, if you had security in place like a dog, you would say you're 10% or 20% responsible if someone, you have signs that says beware of dog.
Mhm.
They ignore the signs, they come on your property and they get bit. You're saying you're 10 to 20% responsible for that person being bit?
You are actually. If you have a dog that you use, so there's real problems with this. Um, and yes, Jessiah, that's what he's doing. If you have a dog that is out of control, and instead of dealing with that dog or training it, and it's aggressive towards people, you just put a sign out that's like, "Hey, beware of the dog. This dog will bite you because I can't control it and don't know how to train dogs." Yes, I would say that you are 100% responsible for what that dog does. If you have that dog and you know how to train it, and you're using that dog as a self-defense or a home protection kind of thing, it is 100% your responsibility that that dog knows how to detain or bite someone. Usually, if you're putting up the beware of dog sign, I mean, some people will put that up because they've got big, dangerous dogs. I don't know many people that I don't know. I don't see that sign around too often. And usually the type of people, I mean, I'm generalizing here greatly. I'm talking out of my ass, but it seems to me, my personal anecdote about this, the people that I see that are willing to purchase and post signs that say beware of dog are cranks. And probably not the best with animals because they're not great with humans either. And the idea that, like, well, there's a dangerous dog back here, right? Like, I can understand it if you're like, well, it's a liability. I've got this dog that's dangerous. I get needing that signage, especially if you're, say, somebody who is a dog trainer who works with, is attempting to rehabilitate dangerous animals. But there's always an issue when a person is on someone's property and they get bit by an animal. One of the considerations is, well, now we have a dog that's demonstrating aggression, uncontrolled aggression towards a human. Do we need to have that animal put down? Like I said, if this is a situation where you've got somebody who's licensed and is rehabilitating these dogs, they've got lots of signage like, hey, if you come in here, be careful. There's animals in here. They're being rehabilitated. They are not safe to be with. Only licensed professionals and trainers should be with them. That's different. Most people that put those signs out, though, are usually just trying to scare people away initially. Like, hey, if you get here, you're going to get bit by, my Chihuahua, or you're going to get attacked by my Rottweiler. That animal has usually not been trained in any way. So if it's a large dog, a potentially lethal dog, and it can't control itself, that owner is going to be responsible for that person or for that dog to a certain degree. So yeah, you can't completely mitigate the responsibility of the owner on that. Just because you posted signage, it's like, okay, that's a nice warning, but did you post that signage on there because you've got a self-defense dog that knows how to detain a trespasser? Or are you just a lazy weirdo with a crazy dog that's bored and aggressive and large that might bite that person so much they bleed to death in your backyard? If it's that case, oh, you better believe your responsibility is going to be a lot higher than 10%.
Consistency check.
Probably. I've thought about that way because I've never done.
Yeah,
probably. But here's the thing. But again, built into the premises that I would do that in the first place. That's again.
So yeah, Doug's already sneering here. I'm like, I gotcha. And a lot of people have not thought about this. I've been raised with lots of dogs. I've been around a lot of people with dogs. I have spent a lot of time with dogs that are not trained, dogs that hump, dogs that bite, dogs that jump fences, dig, escape, dogs who have no training at all, dogs incapable of even behaving well on a leash. I have seen all manners of dogs, and I've heard nearly every damn excuse you can hear from dog owners. I myself have never personally owned a dog. I've just been with, I've had dogs as a child, grown up with them, lived with friends, roommates, family members who have had dogs and cats, and usually the dogs are not well trained. Most people do not know how to well train a dog. And when a dog gets to a point where it's willing to bite people, most people are very ill prepared to deal with that once that behavior starts happening. You need a pro to kind of pull that back. And even then, it may be too late for some dogs if it's a real problem behavior. Again, I don't know very many people who are capable of training their dog to behave on a leash. And that is much easier than if you're dealing with a dog that you're trying to get to no longer be aggressive towards other humans or even other dogs in some cases. So yeah, the responsibility 100% is on the owner, in the same sense that if a person breaks into my house and I'm armed and I shoot them, what responsibility do they bear? I clearly shot them in self-defense. I am 100% responsible for shooting them. I'm probably not going to be held criminally liable for doing that. They broke into my house. They were engaged in a crime. I was engaged in potentially defending my life or defending my property. I used lethal force with a handgun. I'm 100% responsible for that. If I use a dog as a deterrent and it harms someone, even minor, that is 100% my responsibility. Whether I'm criminally liable for it or not is a different issue. The issue that's going on here with Texas putting the razor wire down is that Texas is imposing itself on the actions, on the responsibilities of what the federal government is supposed to do for border performance. This is a performative security theater that they are doing. We put razor wire up because the feds won't take the hard steps necessary to do that. Like, first of all, you as a state, you don't have to spend money on doing that. Second of all, you don't need to be worrying about this because if this issue needs to be taken care of, it does need to be taken care of by the feds. Their responsibility is the federal border. You shouldn't be spending taxpayer money with a limited balanced budget that you have to maintain, spending that on border theater. And the idea is like, well, if we just don't keep them out, Texas is going to get overrun. Most of those people do not stay in Texas for that long. People are on their way past the border through Texas and Southwest states. Some of them stay, some of them have relatives there. But the big migration groups that we've been seeing, the refugees coming out of Venezuela and places like that, they're moving to other cities. Abbott's been, busing them to Chicago and New York. Those people aren't probably going to be willing to get bused to Chicago or New York if they're not already, at the very least, on their way out of the state as it is. So he was just sort of accelerating that drive. The Texas border narrative is fraught with urban legends, myth, and frankly, just a bunch of hysteria. Not to say that there's not real logistic problems. It's a humanitarian crisis because you got a lot of people coming in and the federal government our immigration system is broken and we don't fund enough of the border to really process the asylum claims that are coming through. So it's a mess.
And why I hesitate is because I'm not wanting to put a dog there, nor do I need to put a dog there. Have I never felt?
Oh my goodness.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. You're asking me about a situation that I've never had any interest in, or
okay. Let me put it another way.
Moreover, I would also add that the federal government of the United States has a higher humanitarian burden than I do as a private citizen. That's also
if you lock your front door,
yeah,
and someone wants to break in, and they hurt, your lock is so good that they actually they break a finger trying to break in. Are you responsible for them breaking their finger?
No. If you have a dog that's designed to harm people, that you've trained to harm people in the event of a break-in, you have a responsibility to make sure that dog is trained to do that well. If you have an out-of-control animal that is a potential threat to anyone that steps in its backyard and it can harm them, that is 100% your fault. So there is a lot of nuance here. The fact, if somebody breaks your window trying to get in and cuts themselves on the glass, that's not it. However, if you plant landmines in your front yard or spikes that shoot up out of the grass or out of the sidewalk to maim their feet, that's a problem. And that's the difference between what's going on here. To what degree were we dealing with deterrents, like razor wire on your house, versus traps, which were those buoys in high water that people can't see? So you can get cut on for no fault of your own. Now, they'll end up blaming the migrants. Well, they shouldn't have been crossing the border anyway. But it wasn't just migrants that were potentially at risk. Kids could have gotten into that if they were curious. They could be going out there wanting to get a closer look at the barrels they could see. One's underwater, slices them up, and they bleed to death in the river. There's a massive safety concern with that. Plus, wildlife can cut itself up on those things. It can change patterns for waterfowl that are in the area, even fish. This is just some lazy, like, well, I don't understand why it's not. Why isn't it cool to put something really big and dangerous and nasty to just get these people to get scared off? Well, one, because you don't have to. Two, because it doesn't work. And three, when it does work, it usually causes so much harm, it's just malicious. Like, well, that'll teach you for trying to cross into, like, they're going to come through anyway. They're going to find, there are ways to get around concertina wire. This is an unnecessary expenditure by the state of Texas. They don't need to be doing this. What was funny was when they tried to sue the government, because, well, these feds coming in here and cutting it down. They're like, that's because we have work to do. We're actually doing the job of securing the border. Texas has put itself in a position of playing like border security dilettante. And again, the federal government can afford this kind of stuff. Whether it's getting the funds it needs is a different issue. That's up to Congress. Congress funds these efforts, and Congress isn't doing shit.
I don't know, because I don't think that the lock
No.
could be designed in a way to break their
Oh,
fingers.
come
Whereas
on.
Razor, it's so funny. It's so funny you talk about disanalogous. Here we've got razor wire, which is designed to hurt, not merely to impede, right? It's not a physical barrier. It's not a wall. It's razors. Now, you may not have any experience with what that is, but you're suggesting that a lock
I was
is
raised on a farm. I
comparable.
know what that is.
Then you should
Yeah, this is just a ridiculous. Like, well, here's the thing. It's not just that I have a really strong deadbolt on my door. My door is rigged to explode when it's tampered with, and it'll just shred the flesh off the person. That'll teach them. Like, no, that's not self-defense. That's a malicious trap.
understand the meaningful difference between a doorknob, which has a lock, and razor wire, Doug. It's so strange that you
But
think these are
I'm
somewhat
doing baby
analogous.
steps with you, because if you can
They're not-
agree that it's not, you're not responsible for that really good lock and someone trying to break in.
No, that's just them injuring themselves on a passive defense system. This is really bad. Holy shit, Doug! What the Doug did not have his Wheaties or something this day. This is bad. Dildo Baggins writes, are you telling us we can't make our property into an Indiana Jones style temple with booby traps? Wait, it doesn't set the fun out of life. You know what? If you can, what signs do you get for that? Like, beware trap boulder, caution, blow darts along pathway.
Razor wire is visible. You can see that this is dangerous. And if you willingly try to put blankets or whatever to get.
Yeah, that's the deterrent part. That's the deterrent part. But the other issue of it is the places where it was hidden, and that was on those buoys that had sunk. So it's not just the deterrent issue. There's also the trap part going on here, and he's not paying attention to that. And Jessiah hasn't brought it up. Neither is the PF guy, but he's split to make
Get across. You're still saying that's what percentage responsibility of the federal government?
I didn't. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying even if I wanted to indulge in that question, which is to what percent I would say that the federal government is responsible for people getting hurt at the southern border, I'm saying that they still just have a responsibility, period, to act in a humanitarian interest.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point, because there is a difference in responsibility there. That's a key point that I think Doug is leaving out. Titan says Texas correction. Texas does not have a balance. Really, they don't have a balanced budget amendment. They rely on more federal money being given to the state than is paid by citizens in federal income tax. Well, that's true I think that's true for a lot, for many southern states. But I think there are plenty of states that have balanced budgets that get federal money on top of that. The state, like for instance, like the state of Michigan, we pay. I think Michigan still pays more money out to federal coffers as a state rather than collecting them. But we do have a balanced budget amendment. Yeah, that's interesting. I just assumed Texas, being all proud and small government and fiscally conservative, would have that kind of restriction placed on their budget. Christopher Moudy's here, and he is here to insult us all. We are all suckers. Yeah, if you're listening to my live show instead of somebody else's, probably are getting suckered. All hope abandon ye who enter here. That's what my sign would say. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to alleviate you of any legal liability, but you can try it. Christopher Moudy, Dem states bail out red states. That's generally true. Yeah, I mean the biggest revenue generation comes from blue states. If you're thinking of taxes that way, in terms of state expenditures, input output of funds, yes. Okay, let's see. By the way, hello, KCA Randy. Good to see you. Okay, but this point that Jessiah made up, so it's one thing to say, like, Doug wants to shift this thing on here, like, hey, look, the state of Texas. So what if the state of Texas wants to do this? It's our land. We want to put up a big ass row of razor wire and abandon all hope, ye who attempt to throw a blanket over it and cross here. Maybe don't send your kids over first. If you don't want to lose them, have them lop off a finger or something. But there's also the responsibility of dealing with a refugee crisis in a humane manner, not paying attention to the flow of people coming from these countries to the south of us who are fleeing places like Venezuela, which the United States and especially conservative media has no problem labeling a hellhole, a failed state, a nightmare on earth, but when it turns out that their rhetoric actually does kind of match the reality, and for a lot of people, and those people flee that place, and they're trying to get into other countries where they can make a better life for themselves, and they end up here where we have sort of weird asylum requirement laws and a very patchworked, frankly lunatic immigration policy. Yeah, I think we have a responsibility if we have laws that are not clear, if we don't have, we haven't just made any decisions logistically and organized a better response to this. We have a responsibility, I think, just as fellow human beings, to approach the situation in the most humane way possible, not throw up razor wire like you're trying to keep out coyote. That's not cool. And as someone mentioned earlier, there are people that can illegally cross the border from our north, from Canada down, and no one, in my understanding, has ever thought, no state certainly, has decided to spend its own money to put razor wire along the northern border just in case a random transigent from Saskatchewan decides to wander over. It's just never been a concern. But because we have these migration patterns coming not just from Mexico, but from other refugee channels coming from the south, and the United States has done a shit job of coordinating any humanitarian efforts with those other countries to make sure these people all don't just end up on one country's plate, so to speak. And then on top of that, leaves its immigration policy extremely confused, very ambiguous. That's on us. Throwing razor wire on the border when these people can't know that they can cross the border illegally. They face a penalty for that, but that penalty is worth the risk if they can declare asylum and they can ask for asylum. The majority of them, keep in mind, will not get it. So despite the federal realities of that process going through and how many people are going to, Abbott has just decided, no, it's not enough to put a wall up. I want to put something up that if they attempt to cross it, it kills them or maims them. That is some mean-spirited, inhumane bullshit. And it's just tough guy theater. These people don't belong here, and if they come over here, I'll get you. It's the beware of dog sign, except instead of being like, it's a beware of dog sign with a picture of a chihuahua on it or something snarling, and what they've got is a pack of like half rabid pit bulls there under no control. Like, I can no longer go into my backyard. I've just ceded this territory to become a pain-inducing wasteland for people that would step in here, and I can just like kind of watch from a distance with glee as they get mangled out there. That's fucked up. And that's American conservatism when it comes to, actually, unfortunately, a lot of shit, but especially with the immigration thing. So I think we have a responsibility. I would agree with Jessiah. We have a responsibility to demonstrate some amount of humanitarian inclination towards this issue. And Doug seems to be like, no, you don't. Put up stuff that hurts them. Put up stuff that maims them. It's their fault. It's their fault if they get hurt.
Which means not putting any razor wire.
No, well, again, if you could conceivably persuade me, I think I'm open to the persuasion. If you were to tell me or to show me that it functions as a meaningful deterrent, and
this is what I'm not clear on.
relatively,
I have to stop you there. Deterrent for what? For actually crossing, or for people coming to the border?
What? Why would they don't come to the border? I mean, you've got people that live on the border, man. This is the thing I find interesting about this. There's this line that people cross, but they don't live there. So what we can do is we can turn it into like a little mini war zone, and that's not going to affect people on. It's only going to affect people who try to cross over. It's not going to. It's certainly not going to have any psychological effect on the people who live right on the border or near it. Like, so you live in an area where your rivers are filled with razor wire buoys, you've got walls up, you've got roving guards, spotlights, glass embedded into the tops of the walls, just in case somebody gets, athletic and tries to scale it from the top. That glass will show them who's boss. There's all sorts of weird shit you can do. Should Texas be doing it? No. Texas should not be doing that. No state administration should be taking these efforts. It is the federal government's responsibility to handle our national borders. The fact that the state's border happens to be the same as the federal border, I get that. They're worried about it, whatever. That governor needs to go to the feds and go to Congress and get out and use his bully pulpit to talk to Congress. You need to make changes. And you need to fund these people that need to be down here taking care of this. This is a logistical nightmare. There's a huge group of people coming through here. They're not going to stay here, but a lot of them are coming through here. And the federal response to this has been anemic or inconsistent. Now, that's the argument. I think that's a better argument for him to make. I don't even know if that aspect of the argument is a viable part. That's just how I would be like, Abbott, go say this about it. See if you can get Congress to you put them on the back foot and see if they'll throw some more money at this issue. If you think it's an issue for the state of Texas, I don't know that the federal government hasn't been doing that. In fact, I've seen statistics that show, even with the increases in the number of people that have come over, and that includes this current surge, the number of border patrol agents or federal agents to the per guard relative to the number of people coming over is like 1 to 19. Back in the mid 90s, late 90s, I think it was 1 to 28, 1 to 26. Now, granted, the situation in the 90s was a little bit different because this stuff started ramping up in the 90s when the concern was, well, they just come over here and then hang out for 6 months and then bounce right back. And they just come and go as they please. Like, yeah, that's kind of how borders work. And if you've got visas and stuff like that where they can do that, like I can do that. I can bop down into Mexico and hang out for, I think, 6 months just on a tourist visa. Get a rental, do my live streams, whatever. I could go do that. And then if I don't like it, I could just skip right back. If anybody's like, oh, it's great that you can do that. So you're just hanging out in San Luis Potosi, just doing your thing, right? Like, yeah, it's cool. But if somebody from Mexico was doing that kind of thing, it's like, oh, how dare they? They're not respecting our country. They don't respect freedom. And they showed up here and they started a taco truck. They fed me delicious food. The nerve of them. I'm being facetious there.
Both.
Okay, both.
Yeah.
I'll even give you that it might not be a deterrent for people coming to the border, but it sure heck is a
Well,
deterrent.
wait a minute. What do you mean by crossing? What do you mean by coming to the border? I don't mean by like claiming asylum.
Being on the Mexican side.
I don't think the razor wire needs to function as a deterrent for those like seeking asylum. I just want to be clear. When I say coming to the border, I mean those who intend to cross illegally over the border, not through ports of entry seeking asylum.
Okay, so let's say you wanted evidence. If I were to provide you,
think about that because again, I've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to ask this call. No, wait a minute.
If I were to provide you evidence that it does deter people from actually crossing, maybe not 100%, but let's say 90%, would that be enough to sway your mind?
I would be much more open to it. But
okay, I don't see how that was like a huge win for him. I wouldn't be swayed at all, mostly because of the arguments that I've given. I don't think that that's a sound argument because, again, I don't think Texas has any. I don't think they have any business doing this, engaging in it this way. This does need to be a coordinated federal response because this affects more than just Texas. It affects the flow of these people coming in, and because they're crossing the border and they're coming into the country, they're declaring asylum. They get a court date. They are then legally here. They have illegally crossed in some cases. But if they have declared asylum and they're waiting for their court date, they are then legally here until they're now. If they do not get that asylum approved and they are not authorized to be here, and they find a way to remain, then they are illegally remaining in the country. That can happen. I don't know what the percentage is after that. Usually you end up, if you get down to your court date goes the wrong way and you end up not getting asylum, which I think happens for like 75% of the people that ask, 73%, something like that. It's pretty high. Yeah, you get sent back. So, and I don't think it's as easy. Like these guys are just like, oh, well, then they can just stay here. You know, they'll just skip their court date. Like they skip their court date, a bench warrant gets issued, and they're now on the run. They are illegally here. If they are caught, they will be sent back. They will be immediately deported. That's just going to happen. So, and that's not a comfortable way to live. Yeah, but this. If we could show that it's a deterrent, I think it can be shown it's a deterrent. The problem isn't whether or not it is a deterrent. The initial problem was whether or not that deterrent was becoming a booby trap. That was problem number one. The second problem was just the state getting litigious with the feds because federal agents were removing the razor wire they were paying to have put up. So that wasn't even really a deterrent issue. They're just like, well, the feds are interfering with what we're trying to do. We're trying to secure these borders, damn it. And these Border Patrol agents are like, which is a crazy argument to make, right? You have Border Patrol agents to act as a deterrent. That's the argument for them. You've got Border Patrol agents in marked vehicles, in marked uniforms, usually armed, patrolling the border, and they're going to go into an area where they are visible, their vehicles are visible, and their work is visible as they're cutting down Texas installed razor wire. And your argument is, we put that there to be a deterrent, Fed. Like, I mean, if I were the federal agent getting that static from anybody from Texas, look at my uniform, look at them. What the hell do you think I am, Rube? Like, what the hell is this? Yeah, it's most of this is just nonsense. It's theater. Trying to argue that this is the appropriate deterrent. There are legal deterrents already in place. The vast majority of people are not going to get the asylum that they want. Many of them are not going to be able to make it. Some of them are trying. This is a long Hail Mary pass. They're hoping to get some aid. They're passing through. Maybe they're going to get refugee status. Maybe they're going to be able to get into Canada, get refugee status there. Who knows? But this is not going to get solved with razor wire. That's like, using compressed air to, freeze off a cancerous tumor on your arm. Not making that personal, just saying. I know somebody who maybe did that. So with that being said, let's remove that. There is one other thing that I wanted to cover, and it's even shorter than that one. I might as well cover it when I'm here. Let's see. It was another short video that he made, and it was a recent one. I think it's his immigration. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I haven't tried sharing one of these before, so this is gonna. It's not this one. It's the one above it. I just did this because I'm not sure. These are weird. Mouty, you and your compassion soy boy. That's it. I'm a big old lib beta cook. Been cooked by the progressive movement. Yeah. It's very soy of me to say like, hey, wait a minute. Do I have any kind of responsibility to show some humanity in this situation? Now, if you're a Christian, you better believe that is the case. You're supposed to be taking care of these people. So if you're a conservative American Christian and you think the solution to dealing with a crisis of the immigrant, the refugee, the displaced, the dispossessed, is to passive aggressively make things as brutal as possible for them. Let's just heap on a little bit more pain, suffering, and potential death to the equation instead of taking them in and washing their feet. I'm not saying this is a national approach to the situation. I'm saying this should have been the Christian mentality. And the Christians here are, instead buying AR-15s in concertina wire. And then, pumping, saying this is God's country. Like, yeah, but maybe it might be a God's country, but it's certainly not Jesus's country. I don't know what God you're talking about. It sounds like the one that you got in mind is a little bit more exclusive. Okay, so let's get into this one. This is totally different. This is just me rambling because that's the kind of day it's going to be. The one above this is Doug's take on, and let me know if the sound comes through. It should. Doug's recommendations for the American educational system.
So voucher system. Number 2, IQ test every grade level. Number 3, you fail students who don't perform. Number 4, if you're
Okay, so the first thing he says is, oh, you automatically need vouchers. Okay, those are voucher systems. Depending on how you set those up, can be incredibly very poor public expenditure. And then he goes into the IQ tests for kids, like every year. Every year you get an IQ test. I have a relative that works at the professional level of she is in the educational psychology administration of a public school system out west, right? And that's her job. Her job is the evaluation of students. Doug here is saying what these kids need every year. This is my best Doug impression. Every year you get IQ tests, and what do you do? Like if they come up insufficient, they get clipped. Oh, that book learning ain't for you, dim bulb. You need to go right here. You get over there and clean my toilet. I might be mixing up some hillbilly accents there. Anyway, the amount of evaluation that happens in the public school system for kids goes so far beyond IQ tests. The fact that he said this out loud tells me how much he does not know about how education works in this country already. Now, there could be some school systems where they don't do much of any evaluation, but that might be a state level problem. As far as federal monitoring and evaluation protocols, I would have to actually refer back to that relative and ask her. This is actually my sister-in-law. It's my brother's wife, and be like, hey, to what extent do the feds require all states to evaluate students on an annual level, and to what goes into that? I guarantee you that even the federal requirements go beyond the simplicity of an IQ test. So this is freezing your moles off. Your diagnosed cancer, your squamous cell tumor, freezing it off with a little liquid nitrogen on your own, kind of mentality here. Vouchers are free government money without accountability when administered by the Republicans, maybe by the Democrats too. Yeah, actually, even when Democrats have kind of backed voucher programs, oftentimes they have been, it's basically just been a way to shunt federal money away, to accelerate the drawdown of public spending into those schools, the public school system, and allow that money to kind of get hoovered up by for-profit schools that statistics have shown, if you compare them, they don't run anymore. Many of them run much less efficiently, so you're getting less return on your cash, and they end up creating an enormous amount of problems. Many of them are not required to provide anything in the way of special education, which, from the sounds of it, Doug is probably for. Because if you're, hey, we need to check these kids for their smartness, give them that IQ test. Well, what are you going to do for kids that maybe don't hit that IQ test? Are you just going to leave them to flounder? Put them in a free range pen somewhere out back, and they make mud pies all afternoon, and you just hose them off and put them to bed every night. Like what? Like the inability to really grapple with what applied public policy from Doug is always astounding to me. Jefferson, I'm asking this because PMARS tried to spin this. Did you fall asleep on stream recently? He tried saying this to Darth. Recently? Not recently, no. The last, I did one in the middle of the night a couple of nights back, and I was very tired and very whippy because I was suffering from a little insomnia. And mind was spinning, so I decided to jump on and do one. Hell, I was probably a little slurry too. I was kind of wacky, and was on for about 42 minutes, but I wrapped it up. Normally, if I were to fall asleep, I would come to with messages saying, hey, you fell asleep on camera again, bud, or you fell asleep and didn't turn the stream off. That hasn't happened in a long time. I have fallen asleep. So Not sure what he's talking about. I haven't seen PMARS around in a long time anyway. Titan says PMARS says porn bomb streams and is one of the most on the most toxic list. Anything he says, even if true, can be safely disregarded. Yeah, generally. He porn bombed my channel. Fortunately, he didn't get put on screen, but because he was too inept, he started porn bombing in the StreamYard lobby, and you can see what he's sharing on screen. So all I can see are just like, videos of close-up videos of male genitalia ready to go. So I can just like pop it up on there. I'm like, and he was using an alternative name too. Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't use my accent for maple syrup sugar like Doug. Sincerely, an Appalachian Southern. Sorry, man. Maple syrup sugar. Oh, that's so mean. TK said, being stuck in Texas is fascinating watching rural Republicans fighting Abbott and the Christian nationalists running the state on vouchers. The rural Repubs quite like their local public schools. Yeah, and that's actually a big issue, is the amount of defunding that happens in rural schools. And because one of the things that usually happens is that people talk about like what's happened in Chicago, where the funding for like inner city schools has accelerated away from them and towards these sort of gentrified private ones that may or may not be served. Usually they're not able to serve as many students, and they're not able to serve special needs issues or any of this other kind of stuff. They don't have the requirements for it, and they don't spend the money on that kind of infrastructure because it's a way to keep their costs lower. And so it's a big problem, but they make it like that because then they could turn it into a race issue. Like anybody like me is virtue signaling for inner city people whose issues I don't totally understand because I don't live in a major city with that kind of an issue. But at the same time, this is an issue that affects rural public schools. It's even gotten bad enough. It's started to detrimentally affect suburban schools, depending on where the populations in those states and in those city, metropolitan areas are starting to move. So what's been found out, and this can be looked up, George W. Bush, huge proponent of this, got a couple people, very smart academics, to get in on this and take a look because he wanted to make a big push towards kind of federally voucherizing the entire U.S. public education system, K through 12. And what their study ended up coming back with, the best thing that you can do to improve education in the United States is to, 1, keep it public, and 2, fund it highly. That was it. Doing the voucher thing didn't change it. It didn't matter. It was about funding. So if you want good schools, spend money on it because it's a money spending issue. It's not necessarily about making an immediate profit. You're trying to provide an education for the population. Yeah, like I said, the exact opposite. Actually, Graham Jeff recently did a 4 a.m. stream because he couldn't sleep. Yeah, and I wrapped it up and did it quick. Mowdy, 4 a.m. Yeah, it was 4 a.m. All right, here we go.
A child comes from a divorced home or a broken home, one parent home, you have to pay extra for your kid to go to school.
Why? Did you hear that? If a kid comes from a broken home, he's a single family home, single mom or single dad, that child, the parent has to spend more money to get that kid into school. Why? Yeah, that's right. Parent home, you have to pay extra for your kid to go to school. That makes no sense at all. And there would be no way of actually enforcing this because you would be penalizing, essentially, you're penalizing the child indirectly. You're penalizing their single parent directly for circumstances that may have been out of their control. Would Doug say that this applies to somebody who was widowed? If I have a school-aged child and I lose my wife, do I now have to pay extra for that kid because that kid doesn't have a mom? And the thing that I need to then do is, if I want to save money on my child's education, immediately get married, remarry? That is not a humane, practical, or even sane proposition. I have no idea what would motivate that, other than for the state to fuck around with whether people get divorced or not. Hey, make it a financial disincentive for these parents to actually engage with their relationship and maybe separate if it's healthiest for them. Sometimes the separation is good for the kid as well. The idea that the government would use education, a bump up increase, like you have to pay a penalty if you don't, quote unquote, stay together for the kid. That is not fucking healthy. Not even remotely close. Like this, if this were worded as a joke, it would be a dud. This is just offensively cruel and mean spirited. There's no reason to do that to anyone in your society. Not only that, you couldn't get away with it. It would get sued to death. What is the constitutional grounding for this, where the state could put this on an individual? Oh, you got a divorce? Well, you have to pay extra money for your kid to go to school. And this is in his sci-fi fantasy where all schools are voucher systems, supposedly. So I guess everybody's paying money for their kids, because that's sort of a tacit admission that, yeah, even though the per person funding that would have gone to the public school you were sending your kid to now goes to the voucher school, you're now on the hook for a little bit extra every year, maybe $1,200, maybe $2,500, depending on what that school's got going on. There's the public money that goes into it, and then there's the per person per student charge on top of that. There's the tuition on top of that. This would be a great way. Vouchers are a great way to turn K through 12 education into the financial mess that higher education is. And conservative politicians are actively leading the way on that, while denying that there's a financial crisis in higher education financing now. They're just insisting that people pay it. It's a grift.
Number 5, teachers get paid more. Number 6,
teachers get paid more. That's good.
At least half of all teachers in K through 8 have to be men.
Sexist and stupid. How are you going? So that would be an affirmative action policy. So Doug's in favor of affirmative action. We have to have 50% of kids, but 50% of the teachers be men.
Number 7, 80% of high school teachers have to be men.
80% have to be men. So that's another affirmative. That's another quota. So now you're going to be excluded. You're going to be excluding otherwise equally talented, or in many cases, much more talented, much more qualified teachers who are women, because your quota's filled up. Because you want, it's interesting that he says 50% through K through 8, I think, and then in high school, 80% need to be men. 80% sounds a little bit like the same amount of people, the same kind of gender sex distribution that you would see in prison guards. You tend to see, I think, actual guards on the floor actually engaging with the prisoners. You have administrative staff and things like that, but I'd be kind of interested to see those statistics. But this is a weird take all the way through. AR, he must be smoking his maple syrup. Scott, it sounds like Doug PineCreek has listened to himself talk for so long he automatically thinks his thoughts are smart. That's actually an interesting idea. God, if that happens to me, somebody immediately get me into like an intervention, please. Cat the Human, that's insanely sexist. Yeah, it's sexist. It's pointless. It's useless. Like, well, if we get them, we're going to get more conservative guys in there. I don't know what this is about. Like, you need men in there because men are more tough-minded and going to teach kids the necessary things they need to know about. So it's like what? Crypto, poker, not giving a fuck? Those kids are capable of doing that now. There's way too many of them that trend towards that now.
Number 8, no teaching of non-binary or gender, all that stuff.
All that stuff? Like, okay, so no sex ed either? We're not going to teach anything about, so we're not going to talk about, so if a kid's taking some kind of biology courses, we're not going to talk about the differences between gender and what if they're talking about species of animals that can change their sex depending on environmental pressures? Is that going to veer too close to making them question issues about gender too? We've got I can't remember what the name of that term is for species that can do that. Several amphibians are like that. I think they think a stingray. No, the stingray wasn't one that was capable of changing its sex, but I think it could kind of it could get itself pregnant, which is crazy. I think that's a different process.
Number 9, more internships, trade school systems.
Okay, I don't mind the idea of having a lot more applied learning. The thing that I don't like about it is that I think France had to deal with this and might still be dealing with it. Because this was years ago, back in the late 90s. One of my teachers had lived in France for about 6 or 7 years when she was doing her advanced studies over there. And she said one of the things that she didn't like about public education in France, and it was kind of similar to other schools in Europe, normally what would end up happening is that you would be evaluated as a student going through your years, and then at usually right at the point where you graduate high school, depending on what your grades were and how you did, you'd get shunted into the trade schools, and that'd be like applied engineering, mechanical work, that kind of stuff, or you'd get shunted over towards like the more academic, the higher academic kind of stuff, depending on how your grades and stuff flushed out. The problem with that is that once you kind of got on that train, you couldn't adjust. And if you started to change in your later years, like the kind of idea that we have, we're like, oh, I took 4 years off after high school, and maybe I went into the military, I worked for a few years, kind of grew up a little bit, and then noticed I started getting a real love for reading and wanted to get into this, or developed a real love for finance and wanted to get into this. Things I didn't know I would be either inclined to be good at or would even be interested in. And now I know, so I want to pursue those. According to this teacher, she said that was a very difficult thing to get out of higher education in France. And it sounds like what Doug's his plan tends to work that way. There's this idea like, oh, we can see where this kid is now, so we can predict exactly where things are going to end up in the future. This one gets to work on HVAC systems. This one gets to become a professor. That's not an easy system to set up, and it's a very difficult system to attempt to maintain if you live in a country that even pretends to be about liberty. The irony of Dream On playing in the background is rich. I kept forgetting about that. I'll probably end up getting flagged for that because he's got that stupid thing on in there. Dream On, Doug. Sequential hermaphroditism. Cool. Thank you, Wraith Knight. Alex Ritchie says, Spain decided to send all their men under 40 to trade schools, and the country ended up full of useless highways to nowhere. Coasts festooned with empty, crumbling tower blocks and economic collapse. There you go. Compared to Scott Adams, Doug is a poor person. Scott Adams probably thinks Doug is a welfare queen. But they share so many opinions, though. I mean, I think they would have an entertaining poker game.
Number 10, don't let the mentally ill kids in with the healthy kids.
That's a sweeping thing to say. By the way, I don't know if it makes any difference, but YouTube, please don't demonetize this because Doug is an idiot, is using an Aerosmith song in here. Mentally ill kids. What does he mean by mentally ill kids with the healthy kids? Mentally ill in what way? So we need to exclude kids who have what? ADHD? Trauma? Little PTSD? Are those kids not allowed in with the quote unquote healthy kids?
Number 11, severe punishments, expel kids. So voucher.
Severe punishments and expel kids. Yeah, Doug has a sick brain. And would have probably, if he was put in a position of some kind of actually, I don't think that he would do very well at it. And I can click this off now so we don't have to. And my apologies to the YouTube giants. I don't know how these shorts get away with doing this. Maybe he's not monetizing those. But yeah, that's just a dumb take. Almost every single one on there was bad except for pay teachers more. Agreed. The first one was vouchers. You don't need those. If you want to pay teachers more, it's cheaper to just fund public education more. The other ones are unworkable and unmanageable. You cannot exclude the quote unquote mentally ill from the healthy kids. You're not going to be able to do that without getting sued to death because you're discriminating against people with some kind of diagnosable health issue. That would be like saying, like, Well, what I don't want to see we've got a kid in here who has HIV. They shouldn't be around the healthy kids. Like, why? They're not contagious in any way that's a detriment to public health. I mean, we know how HIV is spread. So as long as precautions are done and steps are taken, they have the medical care that they need. They don't need to be ostracized. He's actually talking about ostracizing the mentally ill and then not really even declaring what that is, because that's going to include everybody that he thinks, like somebody who has split personality disorder, to somebody who is has had a psychotic break, all the way down to somebody with the blues. They shouldn't be around the quote unquote healthy kids. If given the range of mental health issues available for humans to experience, and given the number of them being experienced on a daily basis, perpetually, by American citizens at the school age, you're not going to have to worry about doing that. That's just a stupid suggestion. The other one that he said too about we'll have men 50% of them have to be men all the way through middle school, and then 80% of them need to be men in high school. Nope. No, that's discriminatory. It's an affirmative action plan for guys. It's an affirmative action plan for sort of, first of all, you're going to lose so much talent to that. It's going to be incredible for all of the arguments. And Doug's given arguments against affirmative action that would blow up that suggestion. So I would love for him to come chat with me about that bullshit suggestion. There is no way in hell that's going to work. They can't teach certain things also. No. Nope. Educational policy actually in the United States is largely left up to the control of the individual states. So a federal policy that comes down and says none of you states can do this, you can't teach that, can be very tough to do, and have resulted in really some very controversial decisions. Kind of like I think there is a federal decision where they can't teach creation as a quote unquote as some kind of on par alternative to evolution or actual biology. You can't teach them in this as a solution to it. Well, there's an alternative view out there, and scientists agree. Like, no, they don't. You can't teach creation as science. You can teach it you can have a class on comparative religions. You can talk about creation stories and creation mythology and narratives until you're blue in the face if you want to. But what the push was that they wanted, no, we want intelligent design taught, which is creationism, as an alternative to quote unquote evolution. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't science. It didn't hold up. So it didn't meet any of the criteria. So that I think is one kind of superimposed federal decision that kind of worked. But none of these other ones that actually worked. Let's see. Otto, Doug wants quotas for male teachers in schools. Well, yeah. And they get paid more, which kind of goes along with it. We want to pay these guys at these voucherized, privately run institutions that don't provide any kind of, they're not going to be required probably, like he doesn't know this, they're not going to be required to provide any, stuff for the mentally ill, or special needs kids. They're all going to get IQ tests, so they're probably going to get culled that way too. They'll get streamlined out and are okay. So the kids that don't measure up, the kids with the lower IQs and the kids with the mental health issues, where do they go? And if Doug is correct and some of their IQ issues and their mental health problems are directly connected to the fact that their parents have gone through a painful divorce, their parents are now paying extra money for those kids to go to a school they can't even get into because they don't meet the IQ quotient because they're not mentally healthy. Like, this is punishing people who fall on hard times, which finally we're seeing this is Doug's philosophy finally coming true. What you want to do is you find people who are successful on their own and then give them more stuff because they deserve it. Reward that person because the capitalist system is rewarding them already. They're already showing that they can be a winner. What you don't want to do is throw money at the losers, because the capitalist system has shown that they'll blame it on their circumstances and try to, oh, poor me, the system's against me or whatever. But that's not it at all. They couldn't hack it. The system has demonstrated that they're a loser, and any amount of sending aid towards them, that's just good money after bad. This is just anarcho-capitalist, inhumane horse shit. It doesn't work as public policy. You can't get it to get established as anything other than some kind of authoritarian system. Doug is now a fascist. That's it. He's revealed that. He's a fascist. So with that, I guess I'm done. Doug, if you hear this and you want to talk about how fascistic you are, I'd be happy to explain it to you. Jessiah from Pondering Politics. You seem like a nice guy. I wouldn't mind having a conversation with you either. So if you do see this, let me know. Maybe we can set up a conversation on my channel. If you've got a much bigger channel than I do. If you would do me the honor of giving me the views, that'd be cool. If I can be a guest on your channel, that would also be kind of cool. Either way would be a massive favor to me and maybe a waste of time for you. But if you're interested, let me know. Anyway, people can reach me at jeffersonspatchcock@gmail.com by email. My Twitter link is in the bio thing, usually all the time. So yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up with that. Keep this one short and sweet. Well, not so sweet. We're talking about razor wire, and maybe this got demonetized because of that stupid ass song. Private school teachers always get paid much less than public school teachers. Yeah, in a lot of cases they do. That's been an issue with, especially with the voucher schools. The administration gets paid even more. Pine Creek just likes to trigger the libs. I don't. I think with that short, he actually believes that stuff. I've seen him. You can kind of tell when he's engaging in something that he thinks is really going to work somebody up, especially when he's playing with some of his goofy hypotheticals. I think he's actually thought of most of those and thinks that those are good ideas, and they're just flat out not. They're the only way that you could pull them off is if you ran a fascist government, and you would largely have to run it under these kind of the kind of classic fascist goals, like healthy, strong nuclear family first, and everybody else's issues second, and the poor, dispossessed, the mentally, and well, okay, maybe we have to figure out a way to like scrape them under the rug or something like that. But that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is strengthen the already strong, and then find a way to maybe get the poor to finish themselves off quick. These are yeah, he's a fascist. And a godless fascist at that. Thank you, Alex. Great to see you. Thank you, Michael Deaton, and thanks for the moderating that you've been doing. Wraith Knight, you have to make it on your own, Jefferson. Yeah, America has plenty of that already. The fact that these guys want to dig down, double down on that kind of stuff is just like, you don't do this. You don't do anything alone, right? Other than maybe go to the bathroom. And as you get older, sometimes you can't do that alone anymore. You're thankful that there's somebody there to help you. This desire to be completely self-sufficient. I don't need anybody. I can live in the woods. And like, no, I mean, you can do that for a little while. You can survive. You won't thrive. Hotel Yugoslavia, agreed. Pine Creek is a sophist and also likes to trigger people. Agreed. But I think he actually is hateful and is a fascist. Yeah. The hateful part, I think hateful in the sense that it's a lack of empathy. I would agree with you there. I don't know how maliciously hateful, how much emotion is in this, but it is kind of a lack of empathy and a cruelty coupled with a kind of desire to just like, well, we can make this stuff work so much better if we just stop teaching the gender stuff and privatize everything and let the market sort it out. Yeah, that's a bunch of horseshit. Doug doesn't realize how far off that philosophy is working. Like, I don't know a Zoomer or even many millennials that believe that that's really 100% true anymore. We've watched too much business blow up. We've watched too much corruption happen to think that people get ahead that way. That's just how it works. You work hard, you get ahead. Like, you work hard, whether you get ahead or not. Sometimes it depends on circumstances outside your control. Don't tell Doug that. Pine Creek is Tucker Carlson circa 1998. Yeah, it kind of is. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. It's just a little over an hour, so that wraps it up there. Again, my contact info is in there. Reach out to me if you're interested in. I will play our little video to get out of here. Have a great day, everybody, or evening, wherever you're at, but enjoy your weekend or beginning of your week if you're that far ahead. Catch y'all later. Take care.